I find it difficult to sleep due to the incessant yelling of my next-door neighbor, whom we'll refer to as Yeller. The reason behind the commotion is that Yeller's parents are temporarily residing in his house after a tree fell on their own residence. Yeller is assisting them financially with the repairs, and for the 2 weeks they have been in our neighborhood, there haven't been any apparent issues. However, it seems that Yeller's parents possess a mindset that equates excessive material possessions with snobbery. Through my unintentional eavesdropping, I acknowledge that it's improper, but sleep eludes me. I gather that they have been selling some of Yeller's belongings. They've been parting with items such as video games, game consoles, watches, and even clothing, apparently using the proceeds to cover their grocery expenses. To my astonishment, it turns out that Yeller recently took his girlfriend out to dinner and planned to propose to her, but when he opened the ring box, he discovered that the ring was missing. His parents had pawned it to obtain funds for gasoline and cleaning supplies. It's becoming evident that their stay in Yeller's house will not last much longer. Furthermore, they have the audacity to claim that what belongs to Yeller is also theirs, employing the "your stuff is our stuff" argument. They even go as far as labeling him as spoiled. I can hear Yeller shouting at them, demanding that they leave his house. Frankly, I cannot fathom in what world it is acceptable to sell off the possessions of one's host, regardless of whether they are a child or an adult. Such behavior is simply despicable. It appears that the situation is finally calming down. With any luck, I will be able to get some sleep now. Update. I have just learned that Yeller contacted the authorities and reported his parents. He intends to exert some pressure on them until they agree to return his belongings, or else he will proceed with pressing charges. Update again. My apologies for neglecting to mention this earlier. I inquired as to why Yeller didn't realize the ring was missing until he proposed, because I had checked the box earlier in the morning. I placed it inside the jacket I intended to wear and assumed there was no need to check again. I also asked about his girlfriend's reaction, and they were both equally devastated. However, they both initially believed that the ring might have fallen or slipped out accidentally. Yeller didn't want to immediately suspect his parents of involvement. By the way, she did say yes. Today, an incident unfolded at my workplace. As an intern at a hardware store, I'm still familiarizing myself with the store layout. Our main task for the day was to restock the shelves promptly, as we had just received a large delivery. With only 3 employees, including my tutor, another intern, and myself, managing 6 aisles proved challenging. To alleviate the workload, our boss decided to hire interim workers from an external company specifically for restocking duties. Dressed in red shirts bearing the company logo and name, we could be easily identified as store employees. On the other hand, the interim workers donned casual attire, resembling any regular customer. It was during this bustling atmosphere that Karen made her entrance. She approached one of the interim workers seeking a product we didn't even sell, a microwave. Sensing the confusion, I intervened, informing her politely that we didn't carry microwaves. In response, Karen displayed an impolite demeanor, insisting that she didn't want that kid, referring to me. Although I am 21, I might appear younger due to my height and the face mask I was wearing. Undeterred, Karen repeated her request with growing anger, leaving the interim worker at a loss for words. Sensing the need to defuse the situation, I positioned myself between them, reiterating that microwaves were not available and that the interim worker was not an employee of the store. Karen's agitation reached its peak and she began berating me, stating that a child should not interfere in adult matters, while insisting on speaking with my boss. Fortunately, my boss overheard the commotion from 2 aisles away and promptly came to our aid. I explained the situation to my boss, emphasizing Karen's demand for a microwave, to which my boss reiterated that we did not carry such an item. Despite this clarification, Karen continued her tirade, spouting nonsensical claims. Faced with an uncooperative customer, my boss decided to summon security, who promptly arrived to escort Karen out of the store. We thought the incident had concluded, but to our surprise, Karen returned an hour later, specifically targeting me as I noticed her tailing me. She unleashed a barrage of insults, accusing me of portraying her as the villain in the situation. However, little did she know that my boss's boss, the owner, happened to be present and promptly intervened. Once again, Karen was escorted out, but this time she faced a ban from the store as well. I have a group of 3 friends that formed in college over 10 years ago. We used to be fairly close, but one of our friends, Chad, changed massively within 6 months of getting married. He became super chummy with another guy in the group, but distanced himself from the rest of us. Around the same time, all of us got married within a 1-year span. Our wives all get along well, and we have a tradition of taking an annual group vacation. However, from the first vacation onwards, we noticed a disturbing pattern with Chad and his wife, B. They fought a lot. Their fights seemed to be triggered by trivial things like photos not being captured at the right angle, not paying attention to something they were excited about, or not picking an ice cream flavor fast enough. It was baffling. Their fights would escalate to yelling in public, with B storming off on her own while Chad stayed with us, visibly sullen. This behavior ruined the trip for the rest of us because they didn't want to do anything else, and even if they did, they walked around with sour expressions. They even managed to ruin Disney for me. My wife and I made an agreement not to discuss our past relationships or anything related to them. We accepted that each of us had a past, and we saw no point in delving into the details. This arrangement worked well for us, as we knew the number of people we had dated and major milestones, but kept the names and specifics out of the conversation. Everyone in our group was aware of our agreement and generally respected it when we hung out. A couple of years ago, during the holidays, we hosted the group at our new house. We were all drinking on New Year's Eve when the conversation turned to a bachelor party within the group. I mentioned that I didn't remember certain things being discussed, and Chad promptly said, "Oh, you probably don't because you were getting over X." I agreed and made eye contact with him, signaling him to stop. However, he continued describing things we did while I was dating X and how it took me a couple of months to get over her, despite my protests. My wife grew visibly upset, and when we retired to our room at the end of the night, she exploded in anger. She was furious with Chad for discussing intimate details of my past with her. I reassured her that I would speak with him about it. Not wanting to disrupt the dynamics of our group, we didn't make a big fuss about it, but gradually reduced our contact with Chad and B. The same scenario repeated on the next 2 vacations, and my wife declared that she never wanted to invite Chad and B to our home or go on long trips with them again. Last year, the group drove down to our home in the Northeast from the South and planned to spend a couple of days with us before heading to another city nearby, where my wife and I would join them for the weekend. True to form, Chad and B had a massive fight during their stay at our house, almost jeopardizing the second leg of their trip. Another noteworthy aspect is that all the couples in our group were trying to conceive. We had all quit smoking, except for Chad, who was still indulging in the habit. B, who is quite controlling, forbade him from entering the house one night after he smoked. Consequently, he started taking walks to smoke and kept mints and mouthwash outside his house in a safe place. When we joined them for the vacation, the girls decided to go shopping one evening. We met up with another friend from college who lived in the city with his girlfriend. Chad started talking about our friend's college days, intentionally making him uncomfortable in front of his girlfriend by mentioning a girl he had liked back then. Chad then concluded with, "It's fun to make people uncomfortable. I did it a couple of times to this guy," referring to me, "and it gave him a lot of heartburn." It suddenly dawned on me that Chad had been doing this intentionally and that these conversations were not spontaneous but premeditated. I decided it was time to teach him a lesson. We had a guys' dinner the following evening. Afterward, we stopped at a bar to have a couple of drinks, and each of us smoked a few cigarettes. I forgot to pop a mint before we left. Meanwhile, the girls had finished their spa session at our hotel and were hanging out in one of the rooms. As soon as I saw my wife, I rushed to her and asked her to guess what we did today. She wrinkled her nose and said, You smoked and didn't even have a mint." The room fell silent as B looked up from her phone. She asked Chad to come closer, but he refused. She went to him, smelled his hands and jacket, and erupted in a fit of rage. All of us quickly left the room and went for a walk. When we returned an hour later, Chad and B were still not speaking to each other, but they had decided to cut their 3-week road trip short and fly home the next morning. A few days later, I sent Chad a text apologizing for causing him heartburn. But honestly, screw him. During my high school years, I worked as a bagger, officially known as a customer assistance clerk at a local grocery store. It wasn't a terrible job, just a repetitive routine of asking customers if they preferred paper or plastic, carefully packing their groceries, and loading them into their cars. It wasn't highly paid, but it wasn't overly demanding either. However, there were a couple of aspects that made the job less enjoyable. The first issue was the store's strict no-tipping policy. Whenever a customer offered a tip, which happened quite often, we had no choice but to politely decline. It was peculiar how some customers became offended when we refused to accept their kind gesture. The second challenge was a regular customer we'll call Karen. She was a prime example of a choosing beggar. Karen would try to use expired coupons and expect us to match prices from a competitor's sale flyer that was weeks old. Whenever her scheme was discovered, we had to involve the manager. Karen had a habit of snacking on cherries and grapes as she strolled through the store, only paying for the remaining wait at checkout. Whenever we caught her in the act, she would shamelessly deny it. Furthermore, she would overload her cart to the point where items got damaged and then demand a discount or even request them for free. This, of course, triggered another call to the manager. Karen would vigilantly scrutinize how we bagged her groceries, offering unsolicited advice and instructions. It was as if she had taken a course on putting stuff in a bag and considered herself an expert. "Double bag the meat," she'd say. "Don't put all those cans in one bag," she'd complain. "Be careful not to crush my potato chips. Karen, I completed the putting stuff in a bag training when I got hired. I know what I'm doing." One fateful day, my friend Tony was assigned to bag Karen's groceries. Halfway through, she decided to switch from paper to plastic, forcing Tony to redo the packing. To make matters worse, she insisted on transferring everything to a different cart because the one he initially chose didn't look clean enough. When the cashier provided the total amount, Karen erupted in fury, claiming that the prices were ridiculously high and that the store was attempting to rob her. She demanded to know why her double coupon wasn't applied. The cashier calmly explained that Double Coupon Tuesday was only valid on Tuesdays, not on Thursdays. Since Karen couldn't make it on Tuesday, she expected the store to honor the double coupon value on Thursday instead. This led to another call to the manager. The manager painstakingly clarified the store's policy to Karen, emphasizing that Double Coupon Tuesday was exclusively limited to Tuesdays. Karen, in her frustration, declared, "Screw it. Then I don't want any of it." At this point, the manager gave in to Karen's demands, offering her the double coupon value just to get her out of the store. The cashier and Tony were both infuriated, as were the other customers waiting in line behind Karen. As Tony loaded Karen's groceries into her car, she warned him, "Be careful and don't expect a tip from me," Tony replied. "Company policy forbids us from accepting tips." He should have stopped there, but he couldn't resist adding, "Besides, what would I do with your last dollar?" Karen seethed with rage. Vowing to report Tony to the manager for demanding a tip, she stormed off, waddling angrily towards the store. Although Tony could have gone inside to explain the situation to the manager, who was well aware of Karen's outrageous behavior, he had a different plan. He muttered, "Screw it," and took matters into his own hands. Karen stormed into the store and immediately grabbed the manager while we watched through the large windows in disbelief. Meanwhile, Tony began venting his frustration by slamming bag after bag into the trunk of Karen's dilapidated Cadillac, letting loose a stream of expletives like a disgruntled Norwegian. Food went flying everywhere, sodas exploded, boxes tore open, and the eggs. Oh, dear Lord, the eggs! For once, Karen was rendered speechless. The manager stood there in stunned silence, and the entire scene left everyone watching in utter disbelief. Tony walked back into the store, removed his apron, and handed it to the manager. He turned to Karen, his face full of defiance, and said, "Have a nice day. Come again." Then, with a parting gesture, he extended his middle finger towards Karen before exiting, forever etching his name into retail history.